I'm going to talk about depression first. I don't think depression is really what we're taught that it is, or what we think it is. I think I spent all of my teenage years depressed, and then all of my 20s depressed. And yeah, during that time, whenever I told someone that I felt bad, they would sort of react with, "Oh, everything's okay. Don't worry about it. Like, you'll be okay." I don't know, all these cliches, which I think people are essentially saying, "Oh, don't feel what you're feeling," um, and that's about as good as the advice gets. Which to me made me then think I was wrong for feeling what I was feeling, which also created a kind of resistance to it, like a clamping or an entrenchment. Um, so yeah, people don't give you useful advice. And in my 20s, I went to the doctor, and he he gave me this like quiz about depression, and one of the questions on it was, do you newly have suicidal feelings? And I was like, I think I've had suicidal feelings my whole life. Um, and a lot of the questions, I was like, I think I felt all of these things my whole life, which was a weird realization. Um, and then at the end of the test, the doctor was like, "Great, you're depressed. Here are some antidepressants." And antidepressants kind of go along with that advice. Like, people, when you're depressed, tell you not to feel depressed, tell you reasons why you should feel better about whatever they think is important. And I think antidepressants are the same. They're like a method to stop you feeling what you feel. And that's just like a never-ending cycle. So I took antidepressants on and off for, I can't remember how long, maybe 3 or 5 years, and they made me feel numb, apathetic, not really a part of the world. Like, they made me feel less alive, and they hurt. Like, they hurt my stomach. Like, it took me years for my stomach to recover afterwards. And actually, I went to the doctor about that, and they gave me another pill that was to sort of stop my stomach feeling bad. Which isn't a very, it feels like adding layers to something rather than coming up with a holistic solution. It's like, "Oh, you're depressed, here's a pill to stop feeling that." "Oh, the pill makes your stomach hurt, here's a pill to stop feeling that." Yeah. And what I think where I got to was, eventually I got to the point where I didn't want to take antidepressants anymore. They're horrible. And I made a couple of changes in my life which made things a little bit better. I moved to Sweden for work, and that got me out of a terrible situation, and that helped. But I still had this like black cloud around me, or behind me. It felt like this pressure that I was always trying to hold at bay. And it took energy and effort to hold it at bay, almost like my energy was going to that, and then so that I didn't get consumed by it, and then I didn't have any energy for anything else. Yeah. So I stopped taking antidepressants and started feeling what I was feeling, and I entered a kind of crisis, and eventually I just avoided everyone's advice, which was essentially like a method of not feeling what you're feeling. And then it got worse, and it burst in grief. And I went into this horrendous grief, which, like, I felt pain all over my body. I was at work, and luckily I worked outside a lot, and I would drive to my field site. And the grief would often hit on the drive, and I was like, I'd feel suicidal. Sometimes I was driving so fast that I was sort of hoping for a car crash so that it would just put an end to it all, or I'd be so injured I wouldn't have to go to work. I was driving like a maniac, and this like pain was getting larger and louder, and I'd sometimes stop the car, run into the forest, and just scream and cry and sob and like dig my hands into the earth. And I did that for months. Like, I felt suicidal, and all this grief came out, and it felt like going further into it. I feel like society tells you, like, numb it out, don't feel it, avoid it. And then in that method, I just felt it forever. And in going into it, I discovered it's almost like it was an inability to grieve for me. It's an inability to like let go of all of these heavy things. And the process of letting go is grieving. And things kind of got worse. Like, I thought I was going crazy. And on the other side of the grief, that black cloud, that like pressure I used to be dealing with, it's gone. I can't find it these days. And I probably had it for that weight for the first 28 years of my life. I thought it would never go. I don't even have suicidal thoughts anymore. I used to have them on a daily basis. So yeah, grief is the way through. I think depression is an inability to grieve, and I think society is not okay with grief. It's like, oh, we don't know about that place. Don't go any further because we don't want to go there. And grief is a bit like an initiation. Like, on the other side of it, I'm a different person. I'm now intimate with grief, and I got rid of my black cloud. Yeah, I feel very different. And the danger is, like, I was genuinely suicidal, and maybe I wasn't making a direct effort, like I wasn't picking up a gun and shooting myself, but I was hoping to die and feeling excruciating pain. So it's a destabilizing and dangerous place to go to. And I'm better on the other side. So I think, well, one thing I want is to provide more places for people to grieve and give people more support in grief, and to have people sit and be with you rather than tell you don't feel what you feel. So if you know someone who's depressed, don't tell them not to feel it. Don't tell them why things are better. Just sit with them and be with them, and let them grieve. Like, you can hold the world at bay and just let them grieve and tell them it's okay. I think it would have been easier with people, or easier with a guide, like easier with someone just to put their hand on my back and tell me it was okay, so I could let it out and feel safe, and I didn't have to meet a greater pressure of crisis to get it out. I heard someone once, I think on a YouTube video, describe the feeling of depression as feeling like he was in a noisy room the whole time, and the only thmy he could do was deal with how noisy the room was. So all his energy went to dealing with how noisy the room was, which in my mind is just like holding it at bay. And that's how I used to feel. And on the other side of grief, I don't feel that. It's just gone. And I feel better, and I feel more empowered, and I feel more myself. And I think it's such a transition, grief. It lets you become more of yourself. It's like a part of me needs to die. I need to let go of something. I need to grieve and get this out of me. And then because something died, I'm renewed. I'm a different person. I'm more me and I'm better. So that would be my advice for depression. I know that's unusual. It's not what the doctor says, but I think the way through it is through it. And I'd like more people to get there and to go there, and for that to be the advice. And then I think we have to come up with, how do we provide the space for people to do that? Yeah, I wasn't allowed to, in Sweden, I wasn't allowed to leave work unless I was on antidepressants, and I didn't want to take them anymore. Like, they wouldn't give me that time unless I was taking antidepressants, which for me is like, what's the point of having the time if I can't feel it? So I kept working, kept feeling terrible, and it kept coming out. And I'd like people to have the time to recuperate. And this is what happens in tribal cultures and ancient cultures. Like, grief was seen as a huge transition and valuable for the rest of us. So the community gave people that time. They were like doing the sacred work of grief so that they could be renewed, so that culture could be renewed. I haven't got that one figured out, but we need to provide people with those spaces. Depression is not what we're taught. It's not what we think it is, or at least it wasn't in my case. All the advice was terrible from everyone. And the way through is grief. And I want more people to survive it, more people to be empowered. I also think this is what suicide is, like that desire to die and let go gets so big you think it's you that needs to die, and it's not. It's grief. You need to grieve in order for something to die and you be renewed. Yeah, I think suicide is our failing. It's the failing of culture, it's the failing of community, it's the failure of not having the space to let people grieve, and for helping them and for telling them it's okay. I'd like that to change.